Rosa Louise Macaulay Parks was born in Tuskegee, Alabama on February 4, 1913. One day, on a public bus in Montgomery, Alabama, Parks, who was 42 at the time, refused to surrender her seat to a white passenger. During this time in history, the buses were segregated by means of a line and sign which indicated that the front of the bus was for whites and the back was for blacks. As the front of the bus began to fill up, the bus driver moved the line further back, forcing blacks to give their seats up to whites. When Rosa Parks refused to surrender her seat, she said it was not because she was tired, but because she was fed up with the system and saw no reason why she should have to give up her seat. The bus driver came over and asked her to move, and when she didn't, he called the police. Rosa Parks was arrested and later was bailed out by E.D. Nixon, the head of the local NAACP chapter. Soon after this incident, E.D. Nixon began to organize a boycott of Montgomery City buses, and Rosa Parks said, "I knew that as far as I was concerned, I would never ride on a segregated bus again." On Monday, December 5th of 1955, the day of Rosa Parks' trial, people were asked to stay off of buses in protest of her arrest, and they were encouraged to stay home from work or walk/take a cab. Ads were placed all over. Papers and handbills were printed and distributed in all black neighborhoods. On the morning of the 5th, a group of leaders from the African American community gathered at Mount Zion Church in Montgomery, and they formed the Montgomery Improvement Association. This group helped organize and oversee the Montgomery bus boycott, and they elected the newcomer Dr. Martin Luther King as minister of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. When Rosa Parks arrived to the courthouse on the day of her trial, she was greeted by a crowd of 500 local supporters and her attorney, Fred Gray. Unfortunately, Rosa Parks was found guilty and charged a $10 fine and $4 court fee. Rosa's trial triggered a huge boycott. The city's buses were by large empty. Most of the 40,000 African American commuters living in the city at the time had opted to walk to work that day. She spurred a citywide boycott of segregated buses and helped launch nationwide efforts to end segregation. However, there was a strong resistance to this movement. Black churches were burned, Martin Luther King and E.D. Nixon's houses were bombed, and insurance was canceled for the city taxi system that was used by African Americans. A black legal team took the issue of segregation of public transit to the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Alabama, Northern Division, which is Montgomery. Fred Gray filed the suit, and in June of 1956, the District Court declared racial segregation laws unconstitutional. On November 13th of 1956, the Supreme Court banned segregation on public transportation in Montgomery, Alabama. Montgomery then appealed the court's decision, but it was too late. Finally, the boycott ended on December 20th of 1956 because of financial loss and the legal system ruling against Montgomery. Rosa Parks lived a long life and later died on October 24th of 2005 in Detroit, Michigan.
Homer Plessy was born March 17, 1862, to a mixed family in New Orleans, Louisiana. His family could pass as white, but they embraced their black heritage. Plessy considered himself 1/8 black. As a young man, Plessy worked as a shoemaker. In 1887, however, he took up social activism. He became the vice president for the Justice, Protective, Educational, and Social Club, trying to reform the unequal New Orleans public education system. However, things took a turn for Plessy in 1892. 2 years prior, Louisiana had recently passed a law that separated public facilities by race. This included the Separate Streetcar Act. Plessy, fed up with the law and the system, decided to act. In June of 1892, Plessy boarded a rail car. When the conductor came around to collect tickets, Plessy informed him that he was 1/8 black. The conductor told him to go to a different car, but Plessy refused. He was promptly jailed and released the next day on $500 bail. Plessy then went to the state court and protested that his arrest was a violation of his 13th and 14th Amendment rights. But he lost. Not finished, Plessy took the case to the Supreme Court. This is where the famous case Plessy v. Ferguson happened. Here, Justice William Billings Brown created the separate but equal clause which supported quote-unquote equal segregation. However, as history shows, this was most definitely not the case. After the court case, Plessy returned to a normal life as an insurance salesman, and after living for a long time, Plessy passed away March 1st, 1925. His actions helped inspire the formation of the NAACP, and his arguments were used further on in the Brown v. Board of Education case, which overruled the separate but equal doctrine.
Rosa Parks and Homer Plessy are similar because they both stood up for what they believed in. They wanted to make a change because they were tired of the current systems and laws during their time. Parks and Plessy both protested on vessels of public transportation and were effective in enacting some kind of legislation. Rosa Parks and Homer Plessy were also very different. Parks was tired of the segregation on buses, and the boycott around her sparked a pattern of nonviolent protests across the nation. The protest in Montgomery ended up ending in forced segregation on buses. Homer Plessy came before Rosa Parks. He was born in 1862, and she was born in 1913. And he had an immediate yet purposeful protest. Since Plessy was so light-skinned, he had to notify the conductor that he was 1/8 black, unlike Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks had a more impactful influence on American history because she stood up for, or rather, sat down for what she believed in, and didn't go back. Her actions triggered a huge boycott which eventually led to the desegregation of the public transit system in Montgomery, which led to civil rights campaigns and the rise of Martin Luther King Jr. The rest is history. Plessy, on the other hand, made a point to stand up for what he believed in, but later his actions led to the separate but equal law, a discriminatory law that was detrimental to the push for racial equality. Although this was important in some ways, it was not enough. The actions of Rosa Parks led to actual desegregation, and because of this, we believe that she had the more impactful influence on American history.